Really glad you've all come, and hoping you don't all disappear and get locked out at 7. But I'm also grateful for the invitation. It feels really exciting and weird to be talking about open dialogue with you today. The exciting bit is, like many of you, I've got ideas, and I believe that this could be something that's really helpful to our societies and to our mental health system and social care systems. So I'm full of excitement, and I'd love to share some of that with you. And I'd love to hear a bit about your excitements and your concerns, because I have concerns too. One of the reasons I'm slightly apprehensive is because there's quite a few people here that know loads about it too. This is kind of just for one person to stand at the front of a hall and say, so this is what open dialogue is, and this is how exciting it is. It's just my monotonous voice that you're going to be hearing. And that's just weird in an approach that's all about dialogue. If we were a small group in a circle, I wouldn't be so worried, because we'd have lots of conversations and it'd be easier to involve you. But if I try to do too much of that, I think it will get really frustrating, because you won't be able to hear each other. So I'm going to try and find this balance between me sharing some of my thoughts and giving you a bit of time to talk with each other and share some ideas that you've got. So you're not just listening, you're actually getting messy, engaging with it a little bit. And we'll do what we can to involve you in questions and thoughts and reflections. It means those of you at the back might either I run there with this roving mic or you project. I don't know whether there's any singers in the house. That would be really useful. There's any operatic kind of big voices. Otherwise, I can try and repeat roughly what's been said. That's my housekeeping and sharing my worries with you. So, what are we doing here? I think what I'm hoping to explore is this idea about how can we be dialogical in crisis situations? What does it mean to be dialogical, and what is it about crises that can really squish things and make us respond in really fixed ways and not really hear the person, the people, their families, their social networks? I'll talk a little bit about how I think dialogical approaches, not just open dialogue, because that's one brand or one particular approach, but any dialogical approach could really benefit the way we support people who are in distress. And my own little thing as a survivor and someone who's part of the Hearing Voices movement and peer support spaces, whilst open dialogue came from practitioners and therapists, almost like a top-down approach really, people trying to help, it's now reached some really vibrant peer and survivor movements in Australia, in Germany, in England, in America, and lots of other places. It's happening in Finland now too, and it's starting to change it. And so what can open dialogue learn from as survivors? And some hopes for the future. The first bit, until break, will mostly be about this whole being dialogical in a crisis. And then after the break, it will be the peer stuff and where we might go from here. That's my thinking, at least. So, how did I come to be here? Does anyone recognise the cat? It's not my own drawing, I wish it was. It's something I got off the internet, but it's, there we go. It's Schrodinger's cat. There's a reason for that. Half alive, half dead.
Yeah.
Some people might get it. It doesn't really matter, but it makes me smile. So you might know this, that I'm a survivor of being labelled. So I've had labels from schizophrenia to schizoaffective disorder, trichotillomania, say that one 3 times fast. What else? Bipolar psychosis, borderline personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety and depression when I was a student, but I've gone beyond that now. And I'm currently labelled with schizophrenia again after a few years off from the labelling. I've used mental health services for many, many years. I've been sectioned, I've been injected, I've been voluntarily admitted. I was out of services for maybe about a decade, and now, since having the lovely little baby that you heard earlier, back in services, again with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. Survivor of trauma, not my family, but community leader would be the nicest way, and then incidents in my adolescence. Extreme distress, however you want to name that. I hear voices, I see visions, I have unusual ideas. I kind of believe I'm not human, which makes this whole "we're all human here" things we often say quite difficult, in that I might well be an android. No, it's true. It sounds like funny, especially when I'm saying it in this way and I'm standing in front of you, but the reason I ended up back in services is because I found it very hard to acknowledge I had a child when also I'm sure I might not be human. How does this even work? There's a big reason why I feel that I might be an android, and the level of distress I experience varies. But yeah, my relationship with being human is quite tentative. But then, it doesn't really matter, does it? I'm kind of here, I'm quite a nice android. And yeah, it'll be fine. So I have unusual experiences, extremes of mood. And I identify with Schrodinger's cat, mostly because when I was training in open dialogue, you have to do this thing, your genogram, mapping your family history. And I had a real resistance to this, so I had two. One was my official family history, and the other one was a blank page, because I don't exist, which means I don't have a family. So yes, I both exist and I both don't. Right, I'm part of the International Hearing Voices movement. I've set up stuff with young people, in prisons, with the community. I'm telling you these things not because it's like, hey, this is my CV and I'm really cool. It's to give you an idea of the experiences I've had that inform my perspective, because that enables you then to sort of see where you fit with my perspective too, rather than pretending that I'm unbiased. I think my experiences very much inform what I believe. So I've been to lots of different spaces, and my area of interest has been how can we creatively respond to this distress and how can we support each other. It's been very much ground up, lived experience perspective, not therapist or not kind of experience by training. It works. I was lucky enough to get a place on the 3-year open dialogue training in London, which was the first time I think the Finnish training was taken to another country. I was really lucky because I managed to get a place in sort of bartering for some work, because of course as a survivor with some limited income, paying for a course like that is beyond my means. So very, very lucky. And I was lucky as well that Nick, who set the training up, had a commitment to involving survivors right from the get-go, which was very exciting. And he may have regretted it halfway through, but I think it made the course much richer. You can ask people later, maybe. I was an honorary practitioner, which sounds great, it's an honour. It basically means I worked for free. But I was a practitioner in KMPT. This is a statutory mental health organisation, Kent and Medway Partnership, NHS Trust. I'll get sacked for not remembering the name. But it was the first open dialogue team, really, that was working that is working in the UK from crisis to community. So as soon as people were really distressed and came into services, they'd come straight to us, and that's where they stay, unless they didn't want to see us anymore, which was of course their choice. Which is very different, because what usually happens in England is you go to the crisis team, or this team, or that team, and then to the main community mental health team. Then you have a crisis, you go to the crisis team, and then back to the community team. And you dance around different services, drug and alcohol, this therapeutic, that therapeutic. The idea was that we were the team. It's continuity based on the sort of Finnish approach. And I spent a year in that team as we started to develop this approach in England, in the regular mental health service, as a pilot team within a bigger system that wasn't really sure what we were doing. So some of those experiences I'll share with you, because they might be quite familiar to what some of you are experiencing now. I say pre-maternity leave because I went and had a baby and moved. So I'm trying to set up some open dialogue initiatives where I live now. And I'm currently a service user again. I'm also doing a PhD in survivor-led organising, which is kind of exciting. So it means I'm trying to immerse myself in the world of peer support and what we can do for ourselves, which I think fits nicely within open dialogue. So, to be honest, you might think, because I'm the one standing up here, that I somehow have some special knowledge. I'd like to say I do, but I think I'm not unique, and a lot of my thinking is informed by the many conversations that I've had with people. So last night I was at this brilliant off-the-wall critical madness reading group, which I really recommend to anyone who's it. And it's those conversations, those generative conversations, that really makes my brain tickle and gives me the ideas that then I put into this. So I don't own these ideas, so feel free to take them and do with them as you will. I'm influenced by the Hearing Voices movement, intentional peer support, although it's not my particular area, Mad Pride and other survivor movements, and Mad Studies, although I never really think I'm clever enough to be part of that, but I still think it's quite inspirational. It's this idea that, the reason I'm saying this is we can often be pigeonholed as, you know, the special, insightful survivor, which somehow separates us and individuates us, when actually there's a whole wealth and many, many years of knowledge and learning that's out there that I think is a valid alternative to therapeutic learning. And I think it's at least equal to that, and I'll be making that point in the second half. So, being dialogical in a crisis. I did regret this. I was like, why didn't I just start with an introduction to open dialogue? I've got the slides for that already. What I would find useful is to get an idea of who's heard of open dialogue and has a rough idea of what it is. Can you put your hand up? Cool, so quite a few of you. Who has no idea what open dialogue is but was interested anyway? Awesome, a couple of you. So we will do the basics, but really quickly. Not because they're boring, but because I'm kind of, a lot of the stuff that we often say about open dialogue, I can put you in the direction of resources so you can read it. There's some great films and things that will explain it. But I kind of want to go sideways at it. But the basics would be, actually we're going to go over some of the basics anyway, but my understanding of where it originated from is it was a service on the edge, if that makes sense. Tornio is on the edge of Finland. It's similar to Ireland. We've had an open dialogue service set up on the edge of Ireland in this place called Cork. When you're on the edge of something, it's perhaps easier to do things differently, which is great, isn't it? It gives you more flexibility. And in Finland anyway, there was a move towards changing services, especially for people who were diagnosed with a form of psychosis like schizophrenia, in being need adapted, adapting things, adapting the system to suit the person. But I think within Tornio and those that were developing open dialogue, they went a step further. They started to integrate lots of different things that made them excited, I guess. Things like Tom Anderson's reflecting teams, philosophy and psychology, things like Bakhtin and Dostoevsky. Can anyone pronounce that? Yes, what they said, Dostoevsky. I hate that this is being videoed. Put that on like a GIF for YouTube, it would be hilarious. People will pay to see me attempt to say big words. So mixed philosophy, linguistics, therapeutic practice, things from systemic family therapy, psychodynamics, blah, 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 blah. Lots of things got integrated into this. Again, people here may know better than me, but my understanding is the practitioners listen to those bits that are discomforting. If any of you work in the mental health services, have you ever been somewhere or sat somewhere and just, you've had this feeling in your belly, like, this isn't right, I don't feel comfortable with what I'm doing? I certainly have, yeah. It'd be weird if you haven't, to be honest. Not because everything's bad, it's just, it's not perfect by a long way. So many of us do feel that discomfort, and they had the right team, the right people, the courageousness, the flexibility to start changing things and playing with things over years and years and years and years. And that's how open dialogue was developed. It wasn't like someone did a bit of research, created a workbook, a la CBT. Don't know what that one's about, but You don't need to see the pictures. Oh, there they are. Yeah, it wasn't as if it was a ready-made thing that was implemented. It was a kind of a generative growing thing that developed slowly and carefully with lots and lots of training. As to what it is, I think then people tried to define it, to say what the criteria was, the things that we're going to talk about today. But basically, it's a system of being flexible, responding to people, recognising that everyone has a different perspective and that we need to really be open to that, to explore what's going on for people, about creating space for reflecting. It has some amazing outcomes, but most people can critique the research. I'll give you links to it, so you get a little Dropbox thing if you've given your email address, so you can look at some of the resources. But it's not the outcomes that excite me, it's that it feels like a truly ethical way of responding to people in distress. And that's what excites me. You guys might like the research. I think we need to do better research. Hopefully it will make more sense later, but that's like the basics. But let's move away from open dialogue for a minute and think about, well, what is crisis? How do we define crisis? This is where I'd usually ask people and you'd tell me. As there's so many of you, I'm going to move swiftly on and give you some ideas of what I think crisis is. For me, a crisis is something that pushes me, my network, the people supporting me outside of what we feel we can cope. It exceeds our resources. One person's crisis is another person's wave. You know, if I went out in that would be a crisis because I'm not that confident at swimming. For another person, brilliant. They love that. So it's not, you can't have an objective, this is the crisis level. It's got to be something about exceeding the resources of the person, their network, or the system that's trying to support them. Does that seem fair? How do crises feel? I'm going to actually ask you, if any of you can kind of yell out, what do people feel in a crisis? Just to see whether this is... Ooh, what's that?
Overwhelmed.
Yes, thank you. This works. Brilliant, overwhelmed, very much.
Panic.
Loads of panic, yeah.
Paralyzed.
I love that you said paralysed after panic, because sometimes panic makes me active and frantic, but sometimes I get frozen and not know what to do. Anything else?
Helpless.
What was that?
Helpless.
Yes, very much so. Because if I didn't feel helpless, I'd do something. It wouldn't be a crisis. So yeah, helpless. And it's...
Oh, sorry.
No, go for it. Alone. I love that as well, because even if you're in a network of people, like a busy room, if I was having a crisis here, there'd be something that separates me from you potentially. Here I am going, what the hell's going on? And I hope none of you are feeling that right now, but if you are, yeah, sucks. But it can take you out of other people's realities. Anything else? So I'm looking at everyone that's scratching their head or doing something, I'm like, eagle eye. Yeah, lost, confused, whatever, grief-stricken, there's a lot of different words we might use. And I think we all have sort of different responses to crises. I don't know, have you ever avoided the crisis, the person who's having the crisis, and stepped back? Sometimes that's really good, because we need to look after ourselves. Within services, if we avoid the person who's having a crisis or the family who's having a crisis, what might that look like? I don't know, putting them in hospital, maybe. Seclusion, excess doses of medication, perhaps, because that can... Some people find medication intensely useful. I find it quite useful some of the time, not all of the time. But it can silence people and make things seem easier. A really interesting guy I met at the conference in Tornio last year talked about how medication affected him, and he said it silenced me so people didn't know I was struggling, but it was all inside. It was still there. The voices and everything was kind of intensely difficult. It just stops him from vocalising it. So for some people it can leave them alone with their distress. We might embrace it. I don't know, have you ever embraced a crisis? Maybe. If you feel there's something to learn from it, perhaps, if you feel steady enough, there's a lot of things that have to happen to embrace a crisis. I'm not sure I really do embrace it. I may be invited out for tea and have a slightly awkward conversation with it, you know. We sit together, but I'm not quite embracing crisis just yet. A really common response, especially in the helping professions and the helping world, is to try and fix the crisis, right? Because it makes sense. Everyone's feeling really uncomfortable, powerless, helpless, and that's not just the person or the family or the networking crisis, but also those trying to help sometimes. That makes it a true crisis. People naturally might want to fix it, make it better. But to fix something, what do you need to do? Well, if you're a plumber and you try to fix a plumbing system, you have to work out what the problem is. Fixing puts us sometimes in this problem space where we're trying to identify the issue and then do something to, I shouldn't say fix, is there another word for fix? Rectify. See, I have language. Sometimes I don't. So there's different ways of thinking about the problem if we're in fixer mode. I just need to say this isn't what I think we should be doing. These are just examples of how it can go within mainstream support or human support. Some people historically have thought that it's the person, something within the person that is the problem. Feels icky, doesn't it? But how can stuff within the person be the problem? Well, could say brain chemicals, biological problem in the brain. I was told that I had a dysregulation in the dopamine system. Has anyone heard that? Not much I can do about that. But if you believe that someone's crisis is down to a dysregulation in the dopamine system, what's the answer? Often it's more medication to at least ease that. So the idea about the problem links sometimes to a solution. It might be that the problem's in the person. It might be someone saying, well, I've experienced lots of trauma, and then that has meant that I perceive things in a difficult way, like have difficult relational strategies, or some cognitive, what's the word, misapprehensions? No, misattributions, and various things that mean that the way I think isn't quite right, and the way I relate to people isn't quite right. What's the answer to that? Therapy, CBT, psychoanalytic therapy. Hospital is also a thing that might kind of contain the person who is seen as the problem. There's been this really dodgy history of a kind of a reaction to seeing the person as the problem, which has been to see the family as a problem, especially mothers. Have you heard about those? Yeah. And this is really contentious, and we often shy away from talking about this because it was pretty painful, I think, for mothers to be told that they're schizophrenic, again, another big word that you can put on YouTube so Ray doesn't know how to speak properly, but basically schizophrenia is caused by mums. High expressed emotion, all those kind of things. Incredibly sexist, really sexist. Some people, a lot of people that get diagnosed with schizophrenia have experienced some form of trauma, whatever trauma that may be, but it's far too simplistic to say the roots lie within the family. But if you believe that, especially back in the days, what would you say? Well, maybe Milan family therapy, you know, work out what the problem is, unsettle things, change it, change the way families relate. Child protective services. I've actually, in recent times, been involved where Child protective services have been involved thinking that their child's problem is because of the mum, a single mum as well. So again, there was a lot of judgments about the way that they lived their lives. And so my role was to try and help the family get through that process intact, which was very, very stressful. Then there's some people would say that the problem isn't in the person, it's not in the family, it's not in any individual, it's in society. Anyone heard of those kind of approaches? It's, you know, it's not a measure of sanity to be adjusted to a crazy, sick society. That the world is crazy making, and actually, to be honest, the world makes me a bit crazy. Reading the news at the moment is not a thing for my mental well-being. So what would the response then be? Well, activism, trying to change the world, accepting people's neurodivergence, you know, the difference, creating spaces where people can be themselves. That might be a thing that we do if we believe it's in society, not in the person themselves. I don't know which is right. The challenge I have with all of this, you like the koala? The challenge I have with all of this is because crises tend to push us past our resources, it almost polarises us. So we're much more likely to hang on, like this koala, to the belief system that we're most comfortable with. So if you're trained in seeing someone as having an illness, a biological based illness with some social and psychological parts to it, but mostly an illness, in the crisis, you might revert to that way of seeing someone and those kind of responses. The same with seeing the family as the problem, the same with seeing society as the problem. That might feel much more comfortable and you might know what you're doing in that, but my issue with that is it might not fit. I've sort of received all of those responses to my madness over time, the one where I'm wrong, my family's wrong, and don't worry, you're fine, but everyone else is crazy. And actually most of them didn't fit me because it felt like they weren't responding to me in that moment. There was someone's sort of pre-existing ideas about madness and they weren't related to me. You could have put Bob or Sue or Bunny or Mr. Koala in there and it would have been the same response. Slightly different because we all respond to people, but the beliefs wouldn't have changed. Why is that a problem? Well, when it doesn't fit, it really doesn't fit. And my years of hospitalisations and the chronicity I apparently had of a thing called schizophrenia, I think were from responses that just didn't fit me. And I think a lot of our systemised services don't fit the people within them. Whew. So, on to dialogue. Why do I do that? Good question. What I love about dialogical approaches is, I think what I feel they're trying to do at least, and we can talk about this, is open up space. We don't know what's going on. Like, if you're in a crisis, I cannot know exactly what the cause of this is. I don't even know what it's like for you, because I'm not the expert in you. It's quite hard for you to know me as well. We are other. We're unique individuals that are connecting, hopefully. And so I need to come to this conversation with a deep sense of respect for you, for your life, for your perspectives, for your ideas, for the multiplicity of what's going on for you, and for the people in your life, your family, friends, your dog, you say cat, I don't know, for whoever that is in your life. And recognise that I'm a visitor. Come in gently, be curious, be open, and recognise that I'm going to learn from you. But that by being with you, together we might figure something out. And that's what is often called sort of the art of not knowing. There's a whole philosophy and practice based up around not knowing. Again, I can give you some papers if you're interested. But I just like it. Why do I like it? Because it's humble. It can be quite frightening as well though, can't it? It can feel really better to go in with a, aha, I've seen this before. Joe Bloggs had this kind of set of symptoms and experiences, and what they needed was blah, 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 and therefore this is what we'll do. And certainly when I've worked with families, that's sometimes what they've been used to and what they've kind of wanted initially, which is natural. But weirdly enough, if we feel steady enough and we're compassionate enough and open enough and flexible enough, and that's actually a big ask, if we can do all of those things, I believe it can feel safe enough to not know as a group and to be curious and to find out. We sometimes have to do some very practical things with the space. Someone has to feel safe. If they're not feeling safe at home, that might be going to a crisis house, a sanctuary, a respite, even hospital, which might also not feel safe for the person. So again, we have to be very careful about what safety might mean for someone. But I believe it can be done, and I'll give you some examples a bit later. So what is this thing called open dialogue? Often, I think when we're giving talks, we don't explain it very much, because the amount of people I know that have talked about open dialogue, but kind of gone, I've been to all the classes, I've watched the thing online, but I still don't really know what it is. It might be a religion or a cult, because it does sound like a cult when you've got people like me evangelizing about it. But it's hard to speak about, if that makes sense. it's not easy to put into a tick box list of things that you do that called open dialogue. I think first and foremost, to me, it's a philosophy or an approach. With that, it kind of has a respect of this otherness that I talked about. So there's lots of writing about what this otherness means. Why do I think that's important? Well, for me, I've had so many people claim my experiences, to word it, to, it's true. In hospital, I was told that my voices were delusions and hallucinations, which I believed for a while, but that didn't really help me in the long term. I've had people say I was possessed, and that didn't help me. Lots of people have framed my experiences in various ways and told me whether they were good or bad, and that's actually been really detrimental. So I've been talking about voices for years, but actually my voices are embodied. I feel them in my body, they're watching you at the moment. I still hear my voices. And to talk of them just as voices has missed so much of the experience. Whereas if someone had come to me with the respect that my experience is different, they could have been learning from it, and I could learn from it too, and we could struggle together to find language for it, instead of just defining it by a kind of a clinical list of symptoms. And how much of my experience has been lost because it's not been worded, or rather because some things have been worded and some things have been ignored or denied. We were talking last night about toxicity and shame. That's something that didn't have a place in my medical history, but is something I'm exploring now. I'm starting to play with words and ideas. So respect for otherness, a commitment to dialogue. I'm going to talk about what dialogue is, because that's like a fancy sounding word. But again, it's hard to really explain, because like we're talking, isn't that a dialogue? Well, kind of, but it's something special about it. Finding a shared language, because if we're both other, then that could feel very isolating, but I believe there can be bridges between others, and that we can both contribute to this, to shape this mutual language, the space between us, where we can kind of reach good enough understanding. An appreciation of this thing called polyphony, which comes from that the D word person. What they said 3 times fast. I'll write it on the slides if you like when you get it, and you can try saying it at home. But again, this idea that we've got multiple voices inside us, around us, and an appreciation of that diversity. So philosophy. It's a therapeutic practice. In my team, we used to have a few debates about whether it was a therapeutic practice or not. The psychologist was very sure it wasn't therapeutic and it's not therapy, which he had a good argument for it. I think it is therapeutic, but then I think peer support groups are therapeutic with a little t, not therapeutic with a big T, just helpful. A space for understanding and growth is what I mean by therapeutic. But in open dialogue teams, there's certain things that we do that hopefully help create this space where people can be open and explore and reflect and learn. We tend to meet together with people. We tend to open the conversation, the dialogue, not with a list of tick box questions and so, how has this been, how has that been, but going, so what brought us here? Who wanted to meet? You know, how do you want to use the time? So kind of open questions. There's this thing called reflections that we can talk about in a bit, where at one point in the meeting, you might have a funny feeling as the practitioner and go, I don't think I'm understanding something, or I'm confused, or I've got a worry. Instead of holding on to that and then leaving the meeting and in the car on the way home having a bit of a chat with your co-worker, this is about actually saying, do you mind if we just share some thoughts? And being open in front of the network. This is a huge deal. I used to think it was really rude to talk about people while they're still there. Weirdly enough, I also thought it was rude to talk about people when they weren't there, so I'm not sure when I got to talk. This is, I think I usually talk to people, but it gets easier. And actually the people that have been part of the meetings have found it quite interesting. Initially weird, like we said, let's talk, and then someone said, shall I make a cup of tea, and left us to it, which is absolutely fine. You don't make people sit and listen because what we're saying is really important. Some people might, but I don't think it's a good idea. But you can share the concerns. I could say, as such and such was speaking, I started to get worried. And I'm not sure if I'm understanding what they're saying. And then my colleague might give me some ideas, and then we might say, actually, we need to ask them. And then they might clear it up for us. Sometimes we might reflect after a big period of chatting, just to kind of gather our breath a little bit and give the network a chance to make a judgment, I guess, about whether we're getting what they're trying to tell us, in which case they can clarify things. Like sometimes people go, you know what you said there? No, it's not like that at all. Sometimes it generates new conversations, and the person goes, oh, what you said, like that, but like this, or you know, it kind of inspires something. And I think if it's generative and it creates more dialogue, that's really awesome. Sometimes you're just in the way. Just to be honest, you have this thing that you think is really important and very useful, and you have a chat, and then they just carry on without you. and you're like, yeah, maybe my exciting thoughts and insights are really not that exciting and thoughtful, and we need just to back off a little bit and let people get on with it. Because, you know, it's great, actually, because it stops you holding on too tightly to these ideas that you're having. So there's the reflections. And there's also this idea of actually ending the meeting with saying, when do you want to meet again? If you want to meet again at all. Not going, so I'm free next Tuesday, shall I book you in a week's time? They're going, you know, when would it be useful to meet again? Who might want to be there? Who might be useful to bring? And it's those practices. I think the practice of being sort of asking stereotypical open questions and be not kind of narrowing the conversational space down is part of that too. Lastly, so you've got the philosophy, and the therapeutic practice supports that, really, supports the otherness, the exploration. Then we've got the way of organising services, which supports all of that. It enables people to be more open, it enables that dialogic space to exist. And that's the most demanding part of the open dialogue approach, I think, and that's probably what is happening here. I've spoken to a few people that are trying to implement it in Australia, and that's the real challenge. How do you organise services so that they're flexible and responsive? How do you organise it so there's continuity, so the same group of people, the same group of practitioners can be there for the person's journey? In Kent, we found that once we worked with one person and their network, it might be that actually someone else in the network needs some support too, and someone else. There's been a child who's needed support, a parent, a partner, and we've had to really push the limits of our NHS service and the structure of it to be able to support them all within our team, because usually they'll all go to different places, but it felt like people wanted to be supported together and have separate spaces. So we were kind of, I was seeing a mum and someone else was seeing someone else, then we were both seeing the couple, and then the son got space on his own, and then we all came together. It was like, what do people need and how can we make this work? And that needs great organisation. Even to try and make sure we're all in the same place at the same time felt like a chess game or something, battleships. I don't know about you guys, but in the NHS, this crisis teams, usually you don't see the same worker twice throughout your crisis. It's very rare to have continuity. So yeah, it stretched things. There's principles. I think what happened is, once everyone got really excited about it, someone had to write down, well, what is open dialogue? And I don't say this in front of people that are studying open dialogue, but I don't really like the principles. I think they're great in a way, but what happens when we're trying to distill what something is we miss a bit of the heart. So yay to the principles, but don't think this is just what it is, because we could probably do all that and I think miss some of the respect that I think is at the heart of the approach. So it's immediate. You know, if someone calls, you get your cape on. We used to have an open dialogue theme song in our team. It wasn't very good, but you know, in our heads we were singing it. And you said, when do you want to meet? Weirdly enough, while some people want to meet that day or the next day, some people are like 2 weeks on Tuesday, because they've got a life, and actually we've got to fit into people's lives. But yeah, you're there as soon as the person needs it. A social network perspective, so even if you're only seeing one person, and some people in our team did not want their family or their flatmates involved initially or sometimes ever, I think that's people's rights. I'm not sure I'd really want my family there for all of my meetings during all my crises. Some of them, but not all of them. So even if you're working with an individual, it's using the same approach, remembering that there's a network around them, being curious about that and talking about that within the room, and still doing reflecting and everything else. So you're still opening up space. It's just that the people aren't physically there. I've done a few by Skype as well, but there's been people in different countries. Flexibility and mobility. Sounds like a yoga class, doesn't it? Not good at yoga, but basically we've met people in parks. Some people on the team have met someone who's street homeless on the beach with other people who are street homeless, because that's the network. We've met in the offices if people have wanted that. We've gone to their homes if they've wanted that. And trying to think about times. People have families, have lives, and maybe trying to do college or work or whatever. So just trying to fit in with people and do what's needed. That also involves, to me, not assuming that this network meeting is everything. Some people want individual therapeutic work. Some people want CBT, some people want medication, some people want giant kittens or koalas or wombats. I want wombats. That's all okay. Some people think it's open dialogue or CBT, open dialogue or psychoanalytic psychotherapy, open dialogue or medication. Open dialogue is this holding container which we can bring things together, but people can do other things within it. Which then makes people very worried because it sounds like it's trying to take over the universe. Might be. Responsibility, not chucking people between, oh no, they've got dual diagnosis, they've got to go over there. Oh no, personality's over there. It's like, if you're the one who speaks to a person, you're the one who's responsible for then making sure this meeting is arranged. You're not dropping people, which, has anyone ever been dropped? I've dropped out of services a few times. It's been really useful for me at times. So this is a bad approach if you want to drop out of services, because people will know and be thinking about you. You'll be in mind. Whereas I managed to kind of just fade for a while. Psychological continuity. It's not just the thing that everyone always demands, like, you don't want to tell your story 50 times. How many times do we tell our story in services? A lot. And even if we didn't and say read the notes don't capture the story. But it's more than that for me. It's about whose story is it? The story in the meetings is the meeting's story, the network story. And you as a practitioner, or whatever you are in that network, it's your story too. It's something you're generating together. And there's something very precious about that. So if people keep coming in and out of it, it's disruptive, whereas if you've actually been part of that story generation, there's sort of a deep trust that eventually gets built that I think gets fragmented and fractured in regular services quite regularly. You can bring other people in. I've joined a network after about 6 months, and that can be useful, actually, getting some fresh eyes, but there's enough continuity there for it to feel all right. Tolerance of uncertainty. Ooh. I want to put taking uncertainty out for a cup of tea and getting to know it a little bit. It's this idea that there will be times when we're not sure what's going to happen. Yeah, if you're in services, there's risk assessments, blah, blah, blah. You have to do those. However, we actually don't know. We don't know what will help, we don't know what's wrong, and we don't know if someone's going to be alive at the end of the week, which sucks. I want to know. And to know that we want to know but we can't know is really important, knowing the limits of our power. And finding a way within the network to be okay that we cannot, for 100% certainty, know what's going to happen is key. Why is it key? Because I think a lot of harm is done because we can't keep the worry sorted. Does that make sense? So I know times when I've worked in the open dialogue team that I feel like I've not managed to tolerate uncertainty, are the times where someone's been sectioned or admitted, and we've known that it's not really going to help, but we've not known what else to do. And there's always going to be those times, but we try and tolerate it and stretch it as much as feels safe for everybody in the room. So we're trying to stretch uncertainty a little bit and stretch our tolerance. How are you? Not wrong. God, there's always so much to say. I'm going to say less. Dialogism. Say that again 3 times fast. Dialogism and polyphony. This idea that it's the dialogue that's key, and that there's many, many voices, including my 11-month-old who seems like she's hungry or something. It started in Finland, but it's not Finnish anymore. We always pay respect to the elders, for want of a better word, the people, the pioneers. But I think we shouldn't stick too far in that reverence, if that makes sense, because it develops in that context, and now it's reaching out to different parts of the world with different ideas, different political climates, different systems, different traditions, different cultures, and it changes with that, because it changed and it grew and evolved within that part of Western Lapland. It's going to grow here too. So it's in Australia, some great work that's starting over here. Italy, Denmark, it's been there for a long time. United States, Norway, Germany, Sweden, recently Japan, the UK. We have pod and odd, because we don't like just doing one thing, we're just duplicating it. Peer-supported open dialogue and open dialogue. I was in a peer-supported open dialogue team, but I was the odd in pod, which is only funny if you're if you know the politics of UK open dialogue team. And Israel, we're going to go to Israel, myself and Issel from Ireland, to do some training there, because there's a real wish to develop that in the local scene. Blah, blah, blah. There's all kinds of fidelity. This was the Americans. Really useful if you want to know more about it. You'll get handouts, but I'm not going to stick there. Yeah. Implementation in Kent. Kent is the Garden of England. I don't know how it became the Garden of England, but that's what it's called. And like I said, it was the first place in the UK that it was introduced as a crisis to community approach. How the hell did it get into Kent, into the Garden of England? What was kind of amazing is it was through passionate people, not me. I can't claim responsibility for that one. Yasmin Ishak, the manager of an early intervention psychosis team. Annie, a mother who unfortunately lost her son prior to the implementation of open dialogue, and that gave her a massive passion to change services, and she became trained in open dialogue and worked in the team. And a number of other people. There was people, managers who were into it, people on the ground, and they worked for years just doing a little bit of open dialogue on the side of their usual practice until they were able to get funding to do something bigger, and we got our little team. I remember the first day, start of February, and we were all sitting there around the phone waiting for it to ring. And then we had our first referral, and we had to one person made the call. We were very excited. 6 months later, we weren't sitting around waiting for the calls like that. It was very busy. But it was great because we spent a lot of time in peer supervision, supporting each other, reaching things that we'd not thought through, and just trying to make it all work. We knew that we were getting somewhere when we started to disagree with each other. And then how do you have conversations where you disagree in front of families and networks? That was really important because something we'd been holding back from for a while. And I think we need to be able to disagree with each other to open up the space for the family to disagree or the network to disagree too. And I think the work got a lot safer and better once we were able to do that with care and with compassion. I'll tell you more about the stuff we did later, but critiques. This is where I ask you questions. Have you heard any critiques of open dialogue? For example, open dialogue was a bit like a cult. Yay. You've heard that one?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. I've heard that a fair few times. And I think it's partly because it sounds a bit like it, doesn't it? Because it's hard to describe, and you get lots of people that are really enthusiastic. And then, what happens when we're enthusiastic is I tend to go, woohoo, and tell you it's amazing. And that's not particularly dialogical, is it? Because I'm not kind of going, what do you think about it? So I can get kind of a bit polarised. And what happens when I get polarised? Well, I'm pretty sure you can think of all the problems with it, and what ifs, and yeah buts. And so I'm evoking that sense of yeah, but it wouldn't work here, or yeah, but what about if the family are this, and what about this, and what about that? So in a way, the way we're going about talking about it sometimes provokes that kind of response, I guess. Any other critiques that you've heard or kind of criticisms of open dialogue? I've probably got a few in my pocket if we need them. Anyone heard about the evidence base being a bit crap? Yeah. How do I say this? It's not great. You know, if you look at it, it's good in that it's naturalistic. It's not rigorous, and it's done by people that are passionate about it often. So it can be critiqued, and it should be, because that's research. But then so CBT, the evidence behind CBT ain't great, the evidence behind medication ain't great either. And it's usually done by people who have an vested interest. So this is research. I think that it would be good for us to do more rigorous research, and people are trying that. But then in England, we're looking at an RCT, so randomised control trial, which is meant to be the gold standard. I'm really worried about it, because I don't think that RCTs are the best way to show how open dialogue affects people and what happens. People's journeys, in my experience, tend to be like this. There's an idea that relapse is bad. For me, going through what's called relapse has been great learning and deep learning. If I was part of an RCT and it stopped at this moment when I was in a real crisis, I'd be seen as a negative case. But then things get easier. It's using something that works well in the physical health world, in this humanistic world, which is a bit more woolly and confusing. So I think we'll get reasonable results in the RCT, but it saddens me that we're looking to that for validation. Because I think once we get it, people won't listen and implement it in a wider scale. I'm not sure evidence is the problem here. I've got some ideas about what might help, and that'd be great for the panel actually at the end, is where do we go? Because if evidence isn't the thing that's holding us back, how do we get a more widespread change? Any other critiques? Loads, but I'm not going to. We can talk about them later in the pub, perhaps. Now, because we've only got a little bit of time, 4 minutes, getting a deeper understanding of principles of dialogical practice in 4 minutes. Go. Say hello to the koala. What is dialogue? It's weird, because I thought I knew what dialogue was until I went to study open dialogue. At the end of the 3 years, I feel way more confused about what dialogue is. And that's either that the Finns are really bad at translating to English, or it's more complicated than it seems. Go to quotes. What do other people think dialogue is? Some quotes that have inspired me. There's one by John Schotter, who was an amazing guy. It's not so much how I can use language in itself that matters, as the way in which I must take you into account in my use of it. You'll get these, because I had to read that like 60 times before I make sense of it. The sense I make of it is, whenever I'm speaking, it's not about what I'm saying, it's the fact that I'm trying to be understood, so I'm having to think about you and your world and how to reach you every time I speak. There's some connection there. We exist in each other's worlds when we're trying to communicate. Again, you might see something very different in it. The Bakhtin one. For the word, and consequently for the human being, there is nothing more terrible than a lack of response. I think there's something very annihilating about a lack of response. I remember being on an acute ward when I was a supporter as opposed to a patient, and seeing one lady just be walked by every time. In fact, the only time she got a response was when a staff member sprayed some deodorant near her, some air freshener. And that wasn't a ward I was working on, I was just passing through, but it was kind of like shocking. Imagining, if you've ever watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the girl who isn't spoken to becomes invisible. Great Buffy, great if you need it. And certainly I remember when I was so confused with the aliens and all of this other stuff and the conspiracies, I think people didn't know how to respond to me, so they didn't. And that left me on this island despite being with lots of people. Yorma, another wise guy. God, that sounds awful, doesn't it? A wise guy. How could I talk in a way that increases others' desires to listen? How would I listen in a way that increases others' desire to talk? Listening, you might think, is just like sitting and nodding and going, ah, but have you ever really been listened to and wanted to share more because you can tell that someone's really deeply hearing you? It's sometimes in what they say in response, but there's something non-verbal about really being heard. And being heard is already a dialogic relation. To me, dialogue is more than just talking. It's being open to someone. Like, because I talk to people a lot of the time, but when I have arguments, especially political activist-like ones, I'm not open to changing my perspective. Like, there's some things I'm just pushing a point, and I'm not open, I'm not having a dialogue. I'm basically trying to convince the other person of something. That isn't dialogue. I allow myself to have those, even though I like dialogue, because they're needed occasionally, but they generally don't change much. We all keep our positions, but it can feel good to have an argument occasionally. So it's being willing to be moved or change your position. I don't think I can come into a dialogue with a fixed idea of what is. I have to be open to learning and moving. Responding with authenticity. Responding is, for me, a key part of dialogue, because what do I mean by authenticity? I think with my heart, it's not just with my head, but with my body, my heart, actually being responsive in that. That takes quite a lot of courage, especially if there's quite high emotions around, but it's by just being me. For the first few years of training, I think for the first year of training, most people on courses started to speak more Finnish, which is generally slower, less words, with a great degree of wisdom sounding. What we were echoing was probably Finnish people speaking English, which is going to be slower and sound wiser because the words are more carefully chosen. But as the years passed, hopefully we became more ourselves. And, I'm me. I'm not Yakko. But I had to find out how to be me whilst allowing space, how to sort of be authentic and be okay with being authentic. And creating a space where we can meet and try and understand each other. It's about more than words. I think I can say this because Thea was in the room, but people often say it's like how you communicate with babies and blah, 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 we always respond. And I never really understood it until I had my own little one. And actually, even a catch of the eye or a little smile or a cough or whatever, a frown, naturally respond to it. It's like breathing. For me, and I think when people have enough support, it's a natural thing. And so we enter into the world of dialogue straight away, but somehow we lose that responsivity. And we experience people not responding to us or responding to us in ways that are actually quite harmful. And so there's something about this approach which is getting back to basics, to community and to sharing. So that is